The velvet rope, a divider. It's a separator. Used in events and nightclubs to illustrate exclusivity and class among its attendees. It's interesting that a place which can and has historically offered people freedom and liberation with music, dance and body movement, something that Janet Jackson experienced at the age 10, visiting the famous Studio 54 in New York with her brother Michael. Studio 54 was very formative for Michael, aligning with his deep passion for dance and music, and inspiring his deeply transformative and groundbreaking fifth studio album, Off the Wall. But nightclubs also served as a major influence for the velvet rope, not just the liberation that could be offered on the dance floor, but how the velvet rope serves as a microcosm to the greater social ills and pressures and how they manifest in our lives, hindering freedom, growth, community, pleasure, and liberation. There are two major threads to the creation of the Velvet Rope album and what it chooses to explore. The Velvet Rope sees a much less confident, secure woman as the one in Janet period. Control is a consistent theme to consider in Janet's music, as it has underpinned the conceptualization of her three previous projects: Control, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814, and Janet period. As explored in episode 3, Janet, by the end of the Janet World Tour in 1995, has become incredibly disillusioned with herself, this image that she, along with her husband, Renee Elizondo, have created. This identity came fighting out the gate with Control, wanting to break free from her marriage and family and come into her own. With Rhythm Nation, still in the high from her first taste of autonomy and control, she wishes to form the world in her own image, free from injustice and inequality. With Janet period, she returns to looking inwardly, showing mastery of self and self-confidence, expressing sensuality so confidently. We also explored how Renee was part of this cultivation, a sign of their codependent relationship, but also a sign of how Janet's idea of control is an illusion. She has fought so much for her own control. At what cost? And for who? Because this control has allowed herself to elevate to this fantasy just to be commodified, shown to be evident with the commercial and critical success of her music. For example, with the Janet period album, all 6 of its commercial singles were top 10 singles, and it's her best-selling album. But personally, all it has done is trigger deep insecurity and pain. When asked how long it had taken her to develop the concept of the velvet rope, she says, "I say 31 years. My lifetime. You see, on this record, I've decided to ask myself questions I hadn't asked before. Like everyone else in the world, I've gone through periods of great sadness. I never looked deeply at the pain from my past, never tried to understand that pain and work through it. It's a journey I'd avoided, but one now I have to face." Janet's insecurity is rooted in her childhood. The youngest daughter in a superstar family, she has spoken on the feeling of comparison and insecurity that she has felt. Naturally, your brothers are the Jackson 5, and through her upbringing, they were very disconnected due to the nature of their career of touring, recording, and performing. So this concept of the velvet rope manifests itself as this divider within community, friends, and family, which inhibits affirming connection. Family is often our first community, and within every family exists dysfunction. In the case of the Jacksons, basically on what they've expressed, a lot of this dysfunction seems to be rooted from their father, Joe Jackson. As discussed in episode 1, he is the architect of the Jackson family, becoming this franchise. And for this to be possible, he had to forego his role as these children's father. He was incredibly strict and focused purely on their success as musical artists and not necessarily in the nurturing of them as emotional and socially functioning creatures. This is exemplified in him saying, "Don't call me dad, call me Joe." The velvet rope here serves as this boundary between two individuals, prohibiting connection, affection, and love.
It's very tough. Jacksons don't cry.
Is that the...
Tough.
Really?
Janet says this in her memoir. "We don't know that love is something that already exists within. We act like it has to be earned. Our attitude is, if we pleasure others, we get love for ourselves. But except for those brief moments where the world awards us, that approach makes us miserable." For Janet, this manifested in intense body image issues from young. Her brothers constantly teased her for her weight. Michael created this nickname, Dunk, in reference to her being more pudgy during puberty. Janet's career in the entertainment industry began as a childhood actress, starring in the 2 final seasons of The Good Times as Penny, a young girl who's experiencing abuse and violence at the hands of her mother. And imagine being 10 to 11 and being told by the production team that you're too overweight, to the point where they would have to bind Janet's breasts in order for her to play the role. You're already being wired to perform, to give yourself away at the detriment of your own childhood. And then your body is being viewed as this almost commodity at the age of 10 years old. Here, the Velvet Rope manifests as this block from understanding and valuing your true self. Because your life is a sacrifice. You're constantly performing, acting, singing for other people. Your pleasure and your need to self-actualize, which would actually begin to cultivate during your adolescence, is being twisted and suppressed. As you fulfill your own need by giving pleasure to others, fulfilling their needs. And this sadly makes sense to the fact of why she married James DeBarge. But it's also a pattern that seems to have taken place in her relationship with Renee. With Renee believing for him to fulfill his own needs, he needs to fulfill Janet's needs. This leads into the interlude of the Velvet Rope album, Twisted Elegance.
It's my belief that we all have the need to feel special. And it's this need that can bring out the best in us, yet the worst in us. This need created the Velvet Rope.
I wonder how differently the world would be if we all saw each other as special, deserving of love, care, attention, and the ability to fully come into our own individuality. And it's interesting how this album starts off with a manifesto very akin to Rhythm Nation 1814.
We are a nation with no geographic boundaries, bound together through our beliefs. We are like-minded individuals, sharing a common vision, pushing toward a world rid of color lines.
Interestingly, the emotional breakdown that takes place at the end of the Janet World Tour isn't the first time this happens. It happened after completing her first record-breaking Rhythm Nation tour. Internally, with all this social Western, I'm calling it Western, but it could be global general socialization, is this discord with the success that takes place around you. And I understand, because we all have these feelings of fraudulence and, we call it imposter syndrome. Yet, imagine you have this massive moment, like you actually able to meet the people that are being impacted by your music. And then your mentality is just saying like, oh no, I don't deserve this. Like, they can't really be here to see me. Like, what is it they see in me? And it's that disconnect. It's that disconnect with what you are accomplishing and what you are positively putting out and how positive you are as an individual, that specialness inside of you. And then this socialization, which is just trying to make you not see that you are special. And again, I understand the feelings of fraudulence, but it's interesting that we have these feelings of fraudulence, we have the experiences imposter syndromes, but we continue to put ourselves in situations to receive praise, attention, and adoration. Because deep down, we know that validation, acknowledgement, and recognition is important. Yet we starve ourselves and suffer from it, despite the fact that we actually crave it. And this all starts from childhood, I believe. It all starts from childhood. And again, we'll continue to explore that as we get deeper into the album. Now, going back to the second thread of the creation of this album, there's a socio-political point which was directly a part of the creation of this album.
And so we were having this end of tour, at least the European leg party at Le Bandouche, and I went outside to say hi to the fans. It was snowing outside, and I just said, "Come on in, you guys. You're coming into the party." And the doorman said, he goes, no. We don't let these kind of people in. So I went upstairs. I went back inside the club and went up onto the balcony where Janet was. And I said, I just want them to come in. And she goes, okay, is it sorted out? I said, yeah, they said they're going to bring them in. And then I looked over the balcony and they had sequestered them into a corner with velvet ropes and told them, you're not allowed to interact with the rest of the 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 VIPs or whatever, and it literally upset me so much, where I felt like, isn't it crazy how this world is structured in such a way, these protocols and hierarchies that are born out of insecurity, that make people say, you're a VIP, you're not a VIP. And that to me was the thing. And that was how her album, The Velvet Ropes, that's how we did The Velvet Rope.
So here the Velvet Rope is representative of a class divide. And that's something that's very important within this album, as it's almost, again, it's this evolved message from Rhythm Nation, properly reflecting on injustice and Janet using her pain, and the pain being this enabler to better understand and empathize with others. Which is funny, again, how culturally it's become this thing to hide away our pain and act as if nothing is going on and really mask what's going on inside. Something Janet's had to do her entire life. And again, she said how it was her privilege and her success that allowed this mindset to thrive for so long, to not process the pain. Pain is a velvet rope in and of itself. To take down a velvet rope or the velvet rope means to drop the facade, to process pain and allow those barriers that we put up to prevent people from getting to know the real us. That's where the theme of control crops up, because all of her music is this exploration of the ways in which the velvet ropes have entrapped her from her true self. Where there's this constant need to validate who she is as a person, and that comes so strongly through her 3 previous outputs. But then you see how they were also important in allowing her to take down some of these velvet ropes and allowing her audience and herself to see and value her true self in all of its innate specialness. But there's a specific narrative journey that Janet takes us down with the Velvet Rope, which is exemplified in the first track of the album, The Velvet Rope. And also I think it's important to point out when analysing the album, I'll be referring to Janet, but I think there's also, again, there's a dualistic approach I'm taking in the analysis of the album. I'm treating Janet Jackson as a subject of exploration and analysis, but also there's a character, there's a version of Janet that exists and that's experiencing the album narrative that might slightly defer to her real self. But sometimes I won't necessarily stop to make the kind of differentiation, but expect you guys to do that. So
We have a special need to feel that we belong. Come with me inside my velvet rope.
it's an invitation to the sight of Janet's pain, which has been haunting her entire life. And that's why I felt an importance to really explore and understand what Janet was feeling at the time of the recording of this album. And whilst the album is her being quite frank and honest about what she's experiencing, despite not articulating it step by step, that healing process that she goes on. And it's definitely something you'll see as the album goes on, the narrative gets a bit looser in a sense. But it's definitely her exemplifying how to take those steps to walk through your pain. And she provides, again, almost this framework. We're not giving direct answers because my velvet rope is different to her velvet rope and your velvet rope is different to my velvet rope. In sharing how she avoids, hides, and eventually has to confront the pain is a provocation for you to then go do the introspective work on your own. That's ballsy. And it's a shame that during the album rollout, this was not something that was focused on in the interviews. There was a lot of focus on Michael, her frank discussions of sex, having to defend the soft, critical and commercial performance of the album. Again, something which has always been part of Janet's public narrative, this need to kind of prove herself as her own. But ultimately, again, the desire for control is the antithesis of this album. And relinquishing that control is the whole point of the album. Letting down these velvet ropes that we hold and just being honest and vulnerable whilst encouraging everyone to take part in that process. It's a shame when she says outside leave judgment, outside leave hate, that the press didn't quite get that. You, You is a very difficult song to talk about because I have such a frayed relationship with accountability and honest introspection in places where I am wrong or forced to kind of take a look at what's wrong with me. And maybe one day I'll do like another video about that in a bit more detail. But also, I think it's interesting as Janet is a self-admitted harsher critic on herself. So yes, she does want to take a harsh look at herself and hold herself accountable for her behavior. But where I struggle in fully accepting the tone and rhetoric of this song is that a lot of it seems to be rooted in guilt and shame, and that's why I relate to it a lot. And this episode is why the context of episode 3 was really important, because ultimately this song is Janet acknowledging that this version of Janet Jackson that she and multiple other people have been part of creating for the public and to prove something for herself doesn't actually serve her well. It doesn't negate the power, beauty, impact of her previous work, but ultimately it's a performance, a facade. And that's why the live performances of You and the music video, commissioned mainly as promotion for her 1998 Velvet Rope tour, uses a lot of elements of mimery, reflecting the mask one wears to participate in social reality. The mundane theatre, as it's known in sociology. The act of holding a mask is frankly exhausting, and if you force yourself to keep the mask up, working non-stop for 4 years, it's gonna kill you. And then when the mirror breaks and you literally can't take it anymore, you're gonna hate who you see in the mirror because it's not you. And again, Janet is very quick to take accountability for this, and it's something that I've struggled with because I feel, in some sense, it's not your fault. It's not our fault that we feel this pressure to participate in like this social performance, and it's like none of it's your fault, and a lot of it's actually due to socialization again, and the way we behave, and the reason we have this sense of trauma. And to be honest, I do think there's an element like you can even talk about religious dogma, and perhaps I'll get into that another day. But when you hear lyrics like it's tough because it's true. It's true that a lot of the reason we are the way we are isn't our fault, and I think we all of us as a collective society, we deserve a lot of grace and empathy and care in order to kind of resolve these issues. But for me, that sense of injustice, that sense of I feel like I've been done wrong just by society, it wasn't like this mobilizing force for me. I didn't want to sit and be part of a rhythm nation. I wanted death and vengeance. And recently, through sitting with this song, I've had to say to myself, the mask you've worn for so long has finally come off. And you're angry and you're hurt for being deluded for so long. But in seeing things for the way they are, don't then miss out the opportunity to actually take things for how they are and just kind of having to accept it and ultimately just move on. And sadly, there's a grim naivety that you have to accept about yourself. And I'm super annoyed. Because I read this article review talking about how the album kind of comes across as a bit more naive, particularly in its discussion of sex in quite a like frank way. I can't find it. But you know what? They're kind of right. Because sadly, through this process of kind of waking up and taking off the mask and seeing you realize that you're kind of at the start of this journey. And you have to get up and approach this new world that you know very little about. And that's very, very depressing. But it's up to you to like choose to get up and just take responsibility from that point on. And then there's that I've probably saying that wrong, but it's conscious backwards. And then again, it's like this wake up call. I don't know if that backwards conscious reflects Janet extending herself grace potentially, but ultimately you have to recognize your delusion. and choose honestly to confront your naivete and just keep it stepping. And that's tough.
What's the next song?
The one about me.
This song has a much looser role and meaning to the personal narrative, so to be frank, there is a bit more room for interpretation, but it's important to point out that that is part of the intention of this album. It tells Janet's story and journey through the turmoil, whilst giving enough space for the listener to insert their own perspectives, experiences, and journeys. Sampling Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi, the song takes that proverbial "you don't know what you got till it's gone," with Janet singing mournfully about lost love. And I think every Janet album has a lost love song. Control has What Has He Done For Me Lately and He Doesn't Know I'm Alive, written from the perspective of a woman experiencing first love and it going horribly. She finds an incredible amount of strength in finding and gaining independence at this time. Come Back to Me, the top 2 single of Rhythm Nation 1814, mirrors that perspective of Janet through Rhythm Nation. She feels a lot more strength and confidence and is much more directly assertive and focused on her own needs, which is also a reflection of the rhetoric within the Janet album. But with Come Back to Me, it feels less textures, perhaps with a more optimistic and borderline naive approach on losing love. But again, she's very empowered by this sense of control to a fault. Again, of Janet period is a lot more mature, reflective, and introspective. The song was written for Poetic Justice, a 1993 film starring Janet and Tupac about the growing relationship between postal clerk Lucky and Justice, a poet who's recovering from the grief of her boyfriend being murdered in a shootout. Playing this role and feeling these emotions in this way, which feels a lot more three-dimensional, definitely influenced Janet's language and expression on Janet. And that's evident with a song like Again, which is not necessarily focused on lost love, but the opportunity to rekindle that. And that goes in line with Janet's exploration of sensuality and intimacy on the Janet period album. Got Till It's Gone is very different, as it reflects on the impact of having to look at yourself in the mirror and realize what you've been perceiving your reality to be isn't entirely accurate.
I could turn back, hands to time, make you fall in love. With me again, so would you give me another chance to love you the right way again?
And that's mainly because Janet's perception on control, again, has crumbled. This sounds like a lament, a desire to have that same sense of control that she once believed in so strongly, or it could even be interpreted as the desire to still be delusional, because ultimately, delusion makes life easier. To be delusional allows you to ignore pain and live in some sense of freedom to a certain extent. But we must accept the fact that we cannot live like this forever. It will be the death of you. The narrative of the song places the onus of the blame in the demise of the relationship that Janet is singing about on herself. The choice to remain delusional or ignore accountability wreaks havoc on you, but also those around you, encouraging you to act in ways that you can't even recognize or understand. Because to live in delusion, it means you must forego responsibility and accountability for your behavior. You don't know how sweet delusion is until you're sick of it. And you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And that's a thread that recurs throughout the entire album. Interlude, Speakerphone. In this interlude, Janet uses a song which will appear much later on in the album, I Get Lonely, perhaps the most iconic track of the album. And I think it's interesting, despite the fact that song being this really explosive, emotional and expressive, and by far the longest track on the album, its presence here suggests that this is the point when those feelings of deep loneliness and isolation start to accumulate. And if you look at this album and really break it up into stages, this first half of the album seems like avoidance from the pain, the hurt, and this interlude exemplifies it best. Janet is on the phone with her female friend, who is apparently Lisa Marie Presley, Michael Jackson's first ex-wife and daughter of Elvis Presley. This is also interesting. I'm going to recommend this video about Michael Jackson's marriage to his first wife, so you can learn a bit about the nature of that strange relationship. But again, I think it's interesting that at this time, she's basically closer to Michael's ex-wife than she was to her own brother. And again, it's reminding us of the concept of the velvet rope. And she's playing with herself. And I think masturbation can mean many different things, but particularly in this context, I think it's reflecting Janet's state of loneliness and this invasive desire for someone to just meet your needs in whatever way possible. And again, it's interesting that you can be so stuck in your head that there's people around you, exemplified by Janet being comfortable to wank with her friend on the phone, but it's still difficult to really voice the true pain inside of you and allow the people around you to be part of the healing process, but also just be part of you expressing yourself. Boundaries are a weird thing.
Your coochie gonna swell up and fall apart.
My Need. This is perhaps one of my favourite songs of the entire album, built around the sample of You're All I Need to Get By Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. My Need expounds on Janet's need for her needs to be met, to the point of obsession. Craving attention can be obsessive, Janet confesses, and sexual obsessions may be the strongest obsession of all. When you see him, when you don't know who he is but you wonder what he's like, and when you want him. I'm singing about the need to pleasure yourself. She's completely fixated on her own desire. And in the interlude, we see her pleasing herself, but clearly it's got to the point where this is no longer enough. She needs someone to make her feel whole. She says,
I need you, like the flowers need the rain. I need you, like the roots needs the rain.
this isn't necessarily her singing about a well-acquainted lover like Again or Lonely off the Rhythm Nation project. And because I'm a nerd, let's even talk about that underrated track of the album, Lonely, and contrast this discussion of sensuality compared to this song, My Need. Lonely comes from a much more emotional place. Janet sees whatever sexual or casual encounter she's singing about in the song as a site for emotional connection. It feels like she's happy to give of herself and not really truly be assertive about what she wants.
If you're all alone and a friend you need, like a river flows, you hurt, I'll bleed.
On My Need, it seems like she's completely centered on herself. It does show some sense of growth on that all-important theme of control, that she feels more power to be communicative of her needs. But here there's a tinge of desperation, which I think is interesting to explore. And I think sometimes when there's a conversation about the way people utilize sex as an act of pleasure in their day-to-day lives, particularly women, can be so heavily stigmatized. And I think in discussing this, we can get lost in kind of a sex negative view and knock down casual sex and hookup culture. And I don't really want to get lost in that conversation, but how does the internal pervasive need for sex, for emotional and physical intimacy, how does it drive us to seek that connection in anything and anywhere? There's a strange beauty, or some would say there's a twisted elegance to this fact. But in the same vein, again, there's this unfulfilling quality about all of this. Because what expectations do you end up placing in someone, stranger or not, that they can't live up to? In an ideal world, I feel like everyone would have this innate respect and value for people as human beings, and having this respect of the body. But that's just not the reality we live in. And I feel like in navigating this world of sex, again, going back to kind of the ideas of naivete, you are going to have to confront and figure out how you are going to navigate the space, because it can drive you to further loneliness and sadness. And while I think the concept of soul ties is a bit techie, however, again, boundaries and expectations can be all over the place, especially if there's a dependency issue. Dependency and codependency is a challenge that occurs within Janet and Renee's relationship. So this could be one of the ways in which Janet is also discussing the nature of her relationship. But ultimately, it's a needs issue. Janet can't fulfill her own needs, so she seeks for just that itch that can be fulfilled in any way. And I think it just speaks up to how messed up social reality is. How do we meet our needs, and how do we allow other people to meet our needs, and how do we do that healthily?
I'm sorry.
Now you can say it.
What was I supposed to say?
Chris is so cute.
Blanche your fasten your seatbelts down, it's gonna be a
Go Deep is for the club. It's for the club. Like, it's this encapsulation of the freedom and potential for release that can be found in communal spaces like the club and in community with your friends. You can be experiencing hell and turmoil, and you can have a night out where you can go out and just be free from your problems. And I think my experiences with clubs have been very different. And I don't know if this is, again, it's an indictment of how enduring the quality of this album is, and how it's really an examination of human nature, and it's just right because the problems have got even worse. But because I think if you look historically, I think a lot of liberation and freedom, and that's again, like, look at Renaissance, like that album, how club music and nightclubs can be this freeing space. However, it's not the case anymore. I feel like nowadays we're so obsessed with how we present ourselves and the way we're perceived at all times that it's even hard to just go into the clubs and be fully present and just enjoy the music and enjoy the dance. In 1997, they had the pleasure of not having mobile devices and not having this additional pressure to portray a digital narrative, and of course the album touches on that too, but we'll get there. It also touches on this character arc of having to grasp with being naive and losing control. Janet says, there is this growing acceptance to the loss of control. And while Janet hasn't worked out or explored through the pain entirely, she's taking the world for what it is and trying to find joy in it, even if, again, there's this twisted elegance to it. She's finding happiness, however temporary, and again making those connections to make herself feel whole for the night.
Next song.
Free Zone. This song is truly great. In terms of club and feel-good music, Free Zone is go deep on coke. Thematically, it carries this beautiful message about the LGBT community and queerphobia. In Free Zone, I'm singing about how homophobia or any form of intolerance injures the soul. I'm singing about accepting yourself and living in a world, a free zone, where the world accepts you. Because to truly be yourself, you have to heal from a lot of the things in your life which have inhibited you from being yourself. And Janet is working through that herself. And I think she does talk about how during the making of this album, she did go through a phase of questioning her sexuality. And again, we'll explore that a bit more. But this is how you know that the introspection that she's doing is good quality, because I feel like once you go through all of these things and you realize how society has not allowed you to be you become aware that it's a very systemic issue. She's not alone in her suffering, or you're not alone in your suffering, because society doesn't really allow anyone to be who they are. I feel like, And the violent prosecution of the LGBT community to this day is a sign of that. And it's a shame that her solidarity with the community really kind of got overshadowed with a lot of, again, very vapid conversation and discussion about Janet's sexuality, which we'll also touch on later. In undoing the velvet rope, a free zone becomes possible, a space where everyone can be themselves in all of their innate specialness. In processing pain and trauma, you must also challenge certain dogmas and ideas rooted in your upbringing: sexism, misogyny, racist, homophobia. One rule, no rules. One love,
Free zone.
You don't have to hold on to the pain to hold on to the memory.
Together again. This track starts off with the interlude Memory, which captures an important part of the grieving and healing process, seeing the beauty, the twisted elegance within the pain and the trauma. It's reminded that life hasn't been in vain, despite all the pain that follows throughout. Together Again is about grief, particularly Janet paying ode to those who have been lost to AIDS. Again, another sign of Janet acknowledging and affirming the LGBT experience and the systemic violence waged against their identities. What is so beautiful about this song is finding joy through the pain and the loss. It's interesting that this is literally the album's midpoint. The turmoil that Janet has been walking through is by no means complete. However, there's still joy and happiness to be found. You can be a work in progress and still feel human, to exist without the need to be a perfectionist, to exist without the need to be perfect and have it all together. This was the first real and biggest, probably the biggest hit of the album. It peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 100 and sold 6 million copies worldwide. It was a saving grace of an album that, yes, did debut at number 1, but the fact that it didn't stay there past its first week was viewed as a problem. Got Till It's Gone was the lead single of the album. However, stupidly, Virgin didn't release it commercially in the US. With that particular song, basically what happened is white radio did not touch the record at all. It's interesting, if you look at the top 10 at the release of the time, there was definitely a space for this song to do well, but the label jammed, and it's probably the least commercially minded lead single that Janet had selected at that point in her career. However, Together Again captured listeners around the world. The beautiful house and disco elements, the very Diana Ross-esque delivery. This song is just about being human. It's celebratory in the face of grief. The music video is also important to talk about because it's in this utopic African setting, contrasting but also complementing Got Till It's Gone's setting of a colonial South Africa. This seems like a physical representation of the world that Janet envisions, with humanity having reconciled internal pain and suffering, and the pain we inflict on each other. It could be heaven, where this promise of being together again is fulfilled, but again, it could also be a world which has overcome the velvet rope. There are multiple remixes to this song, and two I want to talk about are the deep and deeper remixes, which as they go deeper, they strip the song of its joyous instrumentation to more mournful R&B ballad stylings. There was actually a music video for the deeper remix directed by Renee Elizondo, which is much more grounded in the album narrative of Janet finding strength amid pain and grief. We see her finding solace and healing after the funeral of a loved one, comforted by the presence of a butterfly, representative of the loved one, but also this idea of metamorphosis, of growing through the discomfort and being able to fly and move on. Empty. This song is a perfect example of the enduring nature of this album and its prophetic quality. When this song was recorded, the internet was a pretty relatively new phenomenon, but now it acts as this second reality, with all of us having to navigate two very different but two equally real places. The interlude and opening of this song features dial-up noises, which I guess is what they used to use back in the olden days. The song is about Janet singing about the dissonance between being so deeply in love with someone that you don't really know due to the amount of physical space between the two. Whether or not this can be interpreted as her even talking about the distance within her own relationship, who knows? But it's mad that even with the general inaccessibility of the internet at the time, that Janet is exploring this perspective. I like computers and use them to write and communicate with people all over the world. I believe computers are capable of tremendous good, but I also think about the people whose only connection to people is through a computer. I wonder what kind of reality that creates, and what kind of romantic frustrations it produces. After the machine is turned off and the electronic glow fades away, I wonder if you feel empty. And let's be frank, this is that our current reality. We spend hours talking to our friends on our phones. That could be a bus journey away. And I think that need for physical presence can go fulfilled for such a long time. And I don't think it's something we really consciously think about on a day-to-day basis, but eventually that sense of loneliness will dawn on you. Like Janet, she's going through the album narrative, and we see her talking a lot with her friends in club settings, and that's great. And however liberating and freeing those spaces can be, it's not really a moment of intimacy. You don't get to properly catch up with your friends and bask in just being in one another's presence. And if that's the way we perceive relationships, love must be a completely different ballgame. And it's tough that for a lot of people, how we cultivate romantic relationships seems to be like pretty much solely online, talking stages, dating apps. It's a tough space to navigate, particularly when there aren't clear-cut rules. The damn disconnected is so sobering because digital communication lacks a lot of social cues and conventions like tone. Even the fact that you can wait the whole day for a simple response to a simple question. Again, if you compare this song to the whole of Janet's last album, which was all about, physical intimacy, this is a different person, and it's so sad. And it's a person that, like many of us, is struggling to make meaningful connection. There's been a shift, and I mean, if you go watch episode 3, my theory is that a lot of this is due to the switch up and demise in her relationship with Elizondo. But it also makes sense why sex is such a comfort and a ravenous need at this point for this Janet character, because sex offers a sense of intimacy and connection that we all yearn for, but it's something that can be found quite quickly in the mid-act of sex. But how can we deal with this need for intimacy and connection romantically and platonically and be satisfied in a holistic way? It's actually something I want to do a separate video on eventually, but I think it's interesting that Janet's getting us to ponder and think about this, because in healing and in becoming a better human being, we have to build a community that's strong, and I feel like online is really messing with that. Digital spaces are really messing with that. So yeah.
Damn. Disconnected. How empty of me to be so full of you.
What about? We all have relationships somewhere in our past where we were wronged, deeply wounded, and we didn't have the guts to face the issue. We were so scared to confront the person who has done the hurting. We stuffed the pain. Well, if we're going to get on with our lives, the pain has to be faced, and the result can be explosive anger. The song speaks to the emotions and feelings one has to confront when dealing with domestic abuse, and particularly the aftermath of having to put yourself back together after an abusive relationship. For Janet, this is her having to confront the trauma of her relationship with her first ex-husband, James DeBarge. The confessional nature of Janet's music means we know how Janet has felt about that relationship over time. I mean, Control can be considered a breakup album in many ways, with songs like What Have You Done For Me Lately and its B-side, He Doesn't Know I'm Alive, a favourite of mine off that album. It, however, does paint the image of the relationship as just a kind of typical teenage love gone wrong, which doesn't really fully illuminate the extent of that abusive relationship. Black Cat off Rhythm Nation is a full-on rock song, incredibly subversive for Janet at the time, but it's fitting for the subject material of the song. The song is Janet singing this warning to a lover who is neglectful of her and wrapped up in substance abuse. Hearing the song and hearing Janet recount the nights she would spend as an 18-year-old driving around looking for her drug-addicted husband is sobering. it's interesting that's actually this song which is the first signs of a sexually liberated woman. With her 1990 VMA performance of this song, we see her rip off her chest, exposing her bra and bare chest. Exploring your trauma and that being creatively can be so therapeutic and allow you to find release and the ability to be yourself, more expressive and more free. She taps into this trauma again on her next album, blending trip hop with opera on this time, on Janet Period, basically singing about why her lover needs to off. What About Off the Velvet Rope is more direct in confronting the physical and emotional torment Janet experienced. This is the most rageful she's been, and it's actually, I'm pretty sure, the first time that she's actually sworn on a track. What About breaks through a boundary that Janet had previously blocked. Singing these songs has meant digging up pain I buried a long time ago, she said that same day in Minneapolis. It's been hard and sometimes confusing, but I've had to do it. I've been burying pain all my life. It's like kicking dirt under the carpet. At some point there's so much dirt you start to choke. Well, I've been choking. My therapy came in writing these songs. Then I had the courage to sing about them or suffer the consequences. A permanent case of the blues. Domestic violence, like so many of life's serious traumas, can seriously impact the way you perceive self and the way you approach relationships. Allowing the pain to fester and sit will allow those experiences to remain trapped in your body. Rage is something that's so interesting, and it's something that's generally frowned upon, and it also contradicts this very sweet, gentle image that Janet exudes. But I think at some point you have to say F that, because rage and being angry and finding release in anger can be liberating, and it has a valid place in everyone's emotional process. Because often anger can be portrayed as destructive and self-destructive, but there's something about anger that can also be quite productive and positive. Elements of this song have to do with me, she confesses, although she does not go into gruesome detail. And elements are from Renee's life. Abuse of all kinds, emotional, verbal, is incredibly common. The challenge is creating boundaries that shouldn't be trespassed. This is also interesting that this song is an amalgamation of both Janet and Renee's experiences, and I mean, which generally there's no problem with, but I wonder how, again, as we explored in episode 3, how the creative process of self-expression and healing is different when your experience, well, as a duo, your histories and ideas are merged into this one person that you're creating. How it can be toxic. And remember when she was talking about those chains of dependency, that challenge of creating boundaries could be something that she's still very much dealing with during the creation of this album. And with the breakup so soon after, it could be a sign of how Janet found Resolute and actually came to a place of understanding the kind of boundaries that she does need in a relationship. And again, it also shows the empowering nature that anger and rage can have, because particularly again in dealing with the aftermath of her breakup with Renee, we do see her tapping into rage with songs like Son of a Gun, I Bet You Think the Song Is About You. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Every time. There is a real change of pace with this song, and it's representative of how confronting your pain can be so healing and liberating. But it really emerges you again in this great sense of naivete. Scared of experiencing a love that can be real and everything that she's hoped for is terrifying for Janet, but perhaps it's what she needs to experience and to fully heal from her past with abusive relationships and low self-esteem. It takes this album concept of the velvet rope and explores how there can be this fear of intimacy, of truly letting go in relationships and feeling safe, something Janet hasn't really seemed to desire throughout the album narrative. Sex, yes. Long-term love and fulfillment, no. Maybe this is something she didn't see as possible, and it was going through this arc, that's something that she's open to. Again, it's interesting that feelings have been written about this feeling in such a precise way from a woman who's now been married for about 5 to 6 years, but still, in all of us, there's a hope in being in a love that's truly fulfilling and healthy. And in the relationship Janet was in, perhaps that wasn't a reality. But again, love can be beautiful and it can be possible. And it's interesting that how we're even kind of starting to tread into all for you territory, just in terms of the themes in that album. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Tonight's the Night is the only cover featured on the album. It's a cover of Rod Stewart's 1978 hit focused on sexual anticipation and pleasure. The line,
"This is just between me and you and you,"
suggests that there's a threesome going on. Well, I mean, no, it doesn't suggest. There's a threesome going on. It is interesting that we're going from a song which is kind of celebrating the love between two people to kind of the jump to a threesome. It can be interpreted as embracing desire, being willing to explore and find yourself. Janet, in an interview during the album rollout, mentions even sexual questioning. Has she ever had a gay experience? No. Am I curious? I think every girl has wondered, more so than a guy. A girl can go there, but I have never. Like mentioned earlier, the album was really clouded by the salacious material in it. I mean, wait till rope burn. And a lot of the press run was Janet fighting the gay allegations. Janet chose not to change the female pronouns intentionally. Being gay and women having sex with women is a reality for a lot of people. So again, Janet being this ally makes her intentions clear. As we approach the end of the album, I think the lyrical content is definitely suggestive of a person that's slowly beginning to accept their full self. And I think going forward, the rest of the album kind of confronts, I think, what was the final step that was necessary for Janet to find this true sense of self, dealing with codependency. Even in this song, with it being a threesome, it seems like it's her negotiating whether or not she feels truly safe and content with the person that she's in love with. Yeah. Too good. This song is too good. This is probably one of the greatest songs of all time. Like, for real. Just the vocal delivery, the way the song is constructed, the emotional depth. I see this as a release to a lot of like the emotional build-up that's been going on through the album. We heard a snippet of this song just before My Need. And again, that's where Janet's kind of at the start of this journey, but she's coming to an end. I think it's significant that we're hearing the full song. She's finally able to express what's inside. Pain can isolate and make one feel socially disorientated and disconnected from those around them. But what we've seen Janet do throughout this album is choose different ways to confront that sense of pain, or even like avoid that pain. So she's done it with friends, she's done it with short-term relationships, and now it seems like we're in a place where she's in something a bit more long-term, just talking about, again, seeing Janet as this character within the album. In being separated from this love, from this person who gives her so much joy, there is a yearning and a sadness in that separation. I also think this song is kind of a look into codependency and how easy it is to lose yourself inside a relationship and being consumed by their presence. I'm aware that hyperbole is a part of R&B, and particularly female R&B music. But again, if you consider it, put it really in context with what the album means and how it's really Janet or unloading a lot emotionally. These lyrics are coming from somewhere, from her, they're coming from within. And again, we know that codependency was a problem in her relationship. The chains of codependency, where egos are merged and identities are confused, are strong. To break them requires real determination. This song also does allow us to look at the concept of the velvet ropes a bit differently. Sometimes we can be so lost in how someone makes us feel and all that they do for us that your sense of self can become lost. When I was talking about What About and how the song is an amalgamation of both Renee and Janet's experience, that conflict, that tension can create a really troubled relationship with how you view yourself. You are the one that lives in me. It seems like Janet, through this infatuation with this lost partner and the feelings of abandonment, offers a bit of reflection on healthy boundaries in a relationship and how important it is that you're open and intimate, but you also have a healthy sense of self.
My lips hurt.
Ropeburn. Ropeburn is such a stark contrast from the previous song, showing how strongly Janet feels about her partner. It creates this polarizing feelings within, perhaps of insecurity and an insecure attachment style. This song paints a portrait of Janet and her partner's use of BDSM and sadomasochism, which ties to the wider narrative and themes of the album.
The whole rope thing takes a slightly different twist on a track like Ropeburn.
Well, I mean, there are certain things that I must say I do enjoy, but I'm not into this, oh, beat me, pain.
Right. Just adventure. Life's an adventure.
I think there are certain things that could be very sexy in the way that they're done. And then you can also go too far, I feel. But that's just me. For someone else, that's perfect.
Janet has come to see a purpose in her pain that she experiences and takes some form of pleasure in it. But also in illustrating like a complex relationship and dynamic with a partner, sadomasochism, that word. Finding sexual pleasure in pain suggests a strange dynamic. Janet is the receiver of the pain, and that makes her submissive in some sense, but she's quite assertive and in control of her desire. And then I just kind of wonder what kind of feelings can emerge from such a confusing dynamic, and how does that reflect Janet and Renee's relationship? We know how much control he exerted over Janet's being and presentation to a crippling level. But also again, Janet, she is the one in control. It's her image and her success that Renee was dependent on. I think this is one of the ways that Janet discusses and emotes about their relationship and its slow demise, which for me, again, is one of the most interesting parts of the Velvet Rope album, and with me now interpreting it as a breakup album. Again, I love the twisted elegance to this album, as there's a joy and celebration and intimacy in this song, but we also know where the emotional journey of the Velvet Rope takes Janet out of this relationship that she's singing so deeply about. It's not a question of what happened, despite, we've discussed that in episode 3. It's about how the music foreshadows this, and how this song is a perfect example of that. How looking inwardly, you start to communicate things that you may not even subconsciously be aware of yet. We know that there was a sense of emotional distance and lack of care that Janet felt towards the end of the relationship, and the desire to just feel a rope burn could suggest that's the only way that she's able to really feel within the relationship. But all in all, I think she's using this imagery, this very vivid sexual imagery, to discuss emotions, to discuss intimacy, showing just how important it is for those two things to be connected: sex, intimacy, and how you're feeling emotionally. Anything. Some are into being pleased, and some are into both. Here the pleasure is about loving somebody so much, feeling such commitment, that their pleasure pleases you, excites you to the point where you'll do anything. You're willing to take it further than you've ever taken it before. This song is very much an extension of Ropeburn, and it feels like Janet is lost in her partner. With Ropeburn, she's definitely more interested in what a partner can do for her, and this song is vice versa, what she can do for him. And the song is a bit less provocative, and I think it's important to kind of consider it as like the final song, not to the album, but to this narrative. It returns thematically to what the core of the album has been. Janet searching for a place to feel loved and accepted, and to be in a place where she can express all the pain within her. Do we see her get there fully? No, I don't think so, and I'll share more thoughts on that as we get to the last two tracks. But where she does end up is probably a most direct mirror to where she was when she released the project. She's in a relationship where she's negotiated or she's starting to feel some sense of security and comfort that she's happy with. But what this song feels like, it feels like someone searching for that final sense of assurance to truly drop the velvet rope.
When you influence me, can't turn back. I'll be your best, and know that good things don't come easy.
And I don't think she ever did. Our marriage died off bit by bit until eventually there was nothing left. Renee was always keen to start a family, but something was telling me, not right now, Janet, not right now. The pain I feel at the end of our marriage is nothing compared to how I would feel if a child had been involved. I have no doubt I would still be in the relationship, deeply unhappy just because of that child. And then, yeah, the album narrative kind of ends there without any sense of strong resolute. But also I think it's because, again, I think a lot of Janet's intent was for this album to inspire the listener to kind of embark on that journey of self-interrogation. And that's not going to be identical with every step isn't necessarily going to be laid out in the album. But it seems like there's a hope for people to see the twisted elegance in embracing your own pain and how that then affects the rest of your reality.
Nothing more depressing than having everything and still feeling sad. You must learn to water your spiritual garden.
Special. Special is a culmination of the album's main theme, the need to feel special and accepted and loved. Acknowledging how our childhood and formative experiences strip us of that feeling, we do really have to confront those barriers, those velvet ropes, to find a sense of hope and true inner belief in self. And it's challenging work, especially when it's easy to adopt a avoidance mentality. It's like a defense mechanism. Your brain rejects and runs from the pain, but when you choose to embrace it and conquer it, you feel freedom and you find yourself. This song is Janet singing to her inner child, and that sort of work can be healing and transformative. It's a full circle moment, and an important symbol of the album is the Sankofa symbol, which has origins in Ghana, specifically the Akan tribe. It's okay to go back and bring things from the past that benefit or help your future and allow you to move on. And finding special, not in a job or a career or a fame or a partner, but really going back and finding it within yourself, with who you've always been. That's what will make you okay and make you be at true peace with yourself. And Janet, she's really done that, and she's looked within and she's freed her mind, and in extension she's created a body of work that can empower other people to feel special too, and create it's like this utopic vision where everyone can have the space to feel special.
Work in progress.
Can't Be Stopped. Can't Be Stopped is a really nice way to end this album, particularly in Janet finding a sense of specialness. She wants others to find that, and particularly with this song being written for the youth, particularly black youth, there's a beauty in it. Janet, she's really trying to tackle something that's systemic, that's generational. Again, it's this care and intention that was found in Rhythm Nation and New Agenda, coming through in a way that is just more mature and authentic, I feel. There is a systemic oppression that comes with marginalized groups, and there's a way that can make them feel so unimportant, lesser, which causes them to hate themselves. And I think that's another reason why I wanted to do this series, because I wanted to show that. I wanted to highlight how important this album is and how Janet is casting this vision of self-worth and self-esteem that I feel like a lot of people do not find in traditional forms of media. There are obstacles and pain you will have to face from childhood, school, but also things that are structural and systemic. And if you start to do the work, Janet, she says, she's a work in progress. But if you commit to uplifting yourself, you can't be stopped. It takes time, but if you give yourself time, if you be gentle, if you be kind on yourself, if you're self-aware and being cautious of behaviors and patterns that don't serve you and who you are deep down, if you fight through the pain, you will come out not necessarily richer, more successful, but you will have the ability to at least face life for what it is and how it is, rather than striving to be in control of your life, your music, your image. Relinquishing this staunch sense of control will release you from the burden of expectation, perfectionism, unhappiness with the way your life should be. And for me, me personally, the Velvet Rope was the start of that. The pandemic was such like a rough time for me, and honestly I felt like I lost some sense of myself. This album helped me. It helped me notice things within that I needed to find for myself, and I feel like I'm still on that journey. Without this album, I feel like I just would have been stuck in this sense of delusion, this sense of escapism, really trying to run away from the pain. And that's why I feel like it needs to be celebrated. That's why people need to understand the value in it, and just the lessons in it, and what it says about self, what it says about the way we should navigate reality, what it says about growing up in your youth and just trying to form some sense of identity, whether or not you're in the biggest music family of all time, or whether you grew up with a single mother, having to really fight all your life trying to negotiate a sense of self that you can be happy with. So yeah.
Don't let nobody tell you you ain't strong enough.
Janet Jackson. You've heard the single, now the coolest album of the year, All For You.
All For You. 2001's All For You is a marked departure from the Velvet Rope and a lot of the heaviness that clouds over that project. But it's really a sign of how Janet has really been able to negotiate, one, through the pain, but two, to the theme of control that we've been exploring through this whole series. There is a freedom and just a liberation on this project of someone who has very little to prove, but is just happy in being themselves, and who's continuing to explore those different parts to herself. There's not really, and I think you don't really see this sense of identity negotiation going on from this point, so everything afterwards is definitely someone who's very firm in who they are, and I think that's definitely why I wanted to explore her life from 1982 to 2001, because I think it just tells a beautiful story. It tells there's a twisted elegance to a story of someone who is brave enough to show those different stages of really coming into your own and finding yourself. And I think the Velvet Rope is the climax of that story, and it's a beautiful story. And yeah, I hope this series of videos has illustrated that to you and encourages you to really, celebrate Janet Jackson and the complex artistry and the beauty of her music. This series has been in the works for a very long time. If you go look at the first video and compare like how much hair I have, shows you just how long I've been working on it. But it's something I'm proud of, that I've committed to this and hopefully told something beautiful. So yeah, this has been Behind the Velvet Rope, Janet Jackson on Control. Until next time, like, subscribe, all them things there. Oh my God.